Have you ever wondered what it's like to get started in real estate with no money, no credit, and maybe not even a job? Well, I'm telling you, it's possible. And we're going to hear a story today from Terrie Schauer, where she's going to go through exactly how she got started in real estate over 20 years ago and where she is today with a large property management company and holding rental properties. And guys, let me tell you, you're not going to want to miss this. Stay to the end, because at the end, we're going to talk about how you, as a new investor or experienced investor, can get over the fear of taking that next step. And you might be looking for a community in the Deal Finders Club that'll help you do that. So stay tuned to the podcast. All right, guys. Well, I can tell you one thing. Being a deal finder and being in this real estate business can be tough on your brain, on your mind space, your peace, and not being anxious all the time. And so we're going to talk about that here in a little bit with Terrie Schauer, who's an incredible person in the real estate space. She's a little bit more north of us, and you might be able to tell the difference between our accents here in just a second. So, Terrie, welcome on. Please introduce yourself to the Deal Finders listeners and tell us kind of where you're from and short story of how you got into real estate.
Sure. So I'm Terrie Schauer. I'm from Montreal, which is in Canada, in the French part of Canada. We have about 1.5 feet of snow outside. It's not nice weather right now.
70 degrees here right now.
But when it's cold, there's nothing to do except go to the gym and do real estate. Yeah, so it's good for focus. Yeah, so I got started. I've been investing for just under 20 years. I bought my first property when I was 26. And the way I got started actually might be of interest to your younger listeners. I really started out as a house hacker. So when I moved away to college in Toronto, which is about 600 kilometers, that's like 400 miles from Montreal, I was going to move into student, like a dorm, but there was no space because I registered late. And so I ended up living in this like co-op, like crazy house of students that was basically not managed. And the day after I moved in there, they voted me house manager. And so I moved out of mom and dad's house into the crazy student house and ended up managing it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that basically through my whole studies. And, at one point I moved to Vancouver also to pursue a graduate degree. And then I rented a big house and divided the rooms up. And, was basically a house hacker before house hacking was cool. So it was a way for me to reduce my rent and stretch my, my meager student salary a little bit further and save on costs. And then once I'd been doing that for 4 or 5 years, I came back home and I said to Dad, look, I've been managing a student house basically for the last 4 or 5 years. Do you not want to lend me a down payment and let's do this for profit? And that's exactly what we did. We went to shopping in what was then like a very bad part of town. It's since gentrified. And we bought this like a triplex, which I then ended up renting by the room to foreign students. And my business model was to create like a sort of a community home away from home for people who were just arriving in town. So that was my beginnings in real estate.
That's awesome. So I have not heard that before of someone being a house manager the day they move out of mom and dad's house. That's incredible. And we do have a lot of people that are just getting started in real estate, and there's so many fears. There's so many things that we're afraid of to go out there. And what happens if I lose my earnest money or I have to put money down? This is a brand new fear that we just introduced to the whole world of walking out of mom and dad's house and managing a bunch of college kids. That sounds very scary. So how, like, did you even know that was a thing, or like you showed up and they said, you're it?
Well, so the real like nitty gritty of the story is I showed up and there was garbage everywhere. So like they hadn't I think they just hadn't, like, the previous people when they moved out, because when people move out there's a lot of trash. And so the trash was kind of like some was in the house. The dumpster hadn't been emptied out because you had to like empty the dumpster and put it in like those big bins that go by the side of the street. And so that had kind of been like that for at least a month. So there was like creepy crawlies everywhere. It was really disgusting. And like I was like, I can't live like this. I'm going to clean it out. So like before I even like unpacked my own room, I'm like, I can't deal with this. Like, let me organize the house. And then we were 15 of us living in there. And so then the other people coming and going saw this new person like cleaning up. And then they're like, we need a house manager. Well, who should be house manager? That girl who cleaned everything.
You're it.
And that was like kind of, how can I say, premonitory, because for the rest of my career, that's basically what I do. Like I now own a property management company and I like clean up after people.
Now you get paid for it at least to clean out when people leave. They leave all their trash.
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, talk about on the job training, right? That's what college is for, is to train you for the with the real world.
But
And
I will say this in terms of it being scary and not scary. I mean, I think in terms of a low pressure way to start, and I get a lot of questions now from younger people. Our market's getting in Montreal is getting pretty expensive. It's difficult for young people without borrowing capacity or large down payments to get in. And one of the sort of lower pressure ways to get in is exactly what I did, to potentially rent a property, portion out the rooms, or else, close on a condo or something, and then, basically put yourself into the business of house hacking. So as like an entryway into things, it's without the pressure, because really, like, I was managing property for 3-4 years with zero pressure. Like there was no, like there was no mortgage. There was no one breathing down my back, no client breathing down my back to about maintenance issues or something. It was just me and the students. And if they didn't clean up, then I lived in a messy place and I didn't like it. Like that was the only downside.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, exactly. So people that are young or flexible in life. That's we kind of say young because most young folks are flexible in life, but sometimes there's older people that just have the ability to move. I think about when kids go off to college and then you're at that stage of life where you could do something interesting and fun and house hack again and, leave the country and do something. But so when you have that kind of freedom of time and flexibility in life, this is an incredible way to get started. And even if you don't know the business, learn the business by getting in there, renting a space, renting out more rooms. So, uh, I could just listen to those stories all day. But tell me about the triplex. How did you find that? So you convinced your dad for a down payment, then you went shopping. How did you find that one?
So I happen to know that not great part of town because I went to college there. Like we have a system in Quebec in Canada where we go to high school, then we have 2 years of like a kind of a college, and then we go to university if we want to. And so like I went to my college thing was in that bad neighborhood, so I kind of knew it. And my dad was like, what do you want to go there for? It's terrible. Like obviously like Montreal, Canada is not, there's not a danger factor because like people here don't have guns, and like if there's crime, it's more like it's going to be, something unpleasant, but there's no actual real danger. So it was more that like you're going to be living in an environment where people might be using drugs, but there's not a danger to you personally. So my dad was like, what do you want to go, live in that area for? And I was like, no, property prices there are cheap. That first triplex cost $300K. And at that time, I went to see a local agent. The agents in that area were super sketchy, like money in suitcases sketchy.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Big thing, right? Yeah.
And the guy, oh God, this was such a good story. Like I didn't have a car. I was 26. I just moved back, and this guy, like I don't know, he must have been like 40, and I was 20, like this 26-year-old innocent girl. He like drove me around in this beat up Toyota. It was gross. His office had fluorescent lighting and stained carpet. But what he did do is like, find on the MLS like a triplex that was not too much for me to chew. So in terms of maintenance issues, it didn't have any major maintenance issues. There were no major tenant issues. And he kind of matched me to this building and then did a hard sell on my dad and was like, you guys are buying this building.
That's a good agent right there. Go to the money. Go to the dad.
And so like, I felt a little bit strong-armed at the time, but of my initial purchases, that's the only one I still own.
Really?
So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's incredible. So, y'all, the Deal Finders podcast, we talk a lot about those first couple of deals. Where do we find them? How do we get started? Because it is a big world out there, and especially with YouTube and Facebook, all this stuff is opening it up to people are they don't want to look in their own area. They're like, oh, that town's better. Everyone wants to go into Cincinnati, Ohio, or whatever it is, because that's a good market. Well, when you're just getting going, you're just getting started, there are deals right around you. There are good properties to be bought in your neighborhood. And so, for instance, this one was right in your college town, a spot you knew. And the reason we say look at what you knew that neighborhood had a bad reputation, so prices are depressed, right? They're lower, but you also knew that neighborhood wasn't that bad. Like it's not scary, like you said.
Yeah.
It's not unsafe physically. So you're able to see something that most people couldn't, and it's on the MLS. But if somebody doesn't have personal experience with that location, they're going to look over it.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time in our market because I'm from here. I've been here most of my life, and so when people say, oh, don't go over there, don't go in that part of town. In our market, people used to exclude entire zip code, and for 5 or 6 years, that's exactly where we bought, and we were getting incredible deals, super safe, clean, great tenants, but they just happened to be the zip code that other investors wouldn't buy. So that's the kind of stuff that local knowledge can get you a really good deal. So I love hearing that. And it's funny because that's what we always hear every time I talk to people. Where was your first deal or two? It's always something that you knew. It's in your backyard. It's in your neighborhood. It's a friend of a friend who lived down the street. It's some kind of connection. So that's really cool to hear. And you still have that one. Is it cash flowing?
Yeah. No, I mean, by now, anyway, like because of like financing, like, so, I don't know if you guys have the same type of financing in the US, but like we have a line between residential and multi-residential family financing. So multi-res, like 6 doors and more, is considered commercial financing, and in that case, they look at the building cash flow. Residential financing looks at at your personal income. And so like I ended up with like now there's a huge line of credit on the property. My mortgage is really small. Actually never refinanced it because I didn't want it like to affect my, my debt ratios and whatever. So like that's like the last one that's left.
Yes. So you might just hold on to that for years, kid. It's gonna be the college town hotspot there. That's awesome. So that's where you started. You found that deal, and I know you've gotten more deals after that. Kind of tell me this was 20 something years ago, right? So you've gone through, you've had some changes. Now you're doing property management. What's kind of the short story of where you went from there, and then let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I'll give you like the kind of quick transition because I think this is interesting, for people who are maybe they've got their first property and they're looking to scale. So like I really did not enjoy the experience of working with that agent for the first building. He ended up finding me a good building, but I didn't feel like I really made the decision process. I feel like he was like, forcing me to do a sale in as least time possible and not taking the time to explain. So when I came to then buy my next building, which was another triplex, like basically in the exact same area, like 5 minutes away, I really decided, okay, this time I'm going to take my time. It was only a year later because my business model that I ran, like renting out the rooms, was so lucrative that like we were able to, up the cash flow and refinance and pull out a down payment for another triplex in which I did the same thing. But so this time I really was like very conscious of like, I don't want to work with a sleazy agent who's going to twist my arm to purchase something that I'm not ready to purchase. And so like I kind of decided to interview agents. And like it was super weird because like I was, 26 and like really green, and like I wasn't a confident 26-year-old. Like there's 26-year-olds who are confident, but like that wasn't me. And to put myself in a position to be like interviewing agents who were like, driving Mercedes and fancy cars, like it was like very nerve-wracking for me.
Right.
But I found this like really nice, like older Greek woman who like, yeah, she was driving a Mercedes, but it like felt like she actually had the time of day to take me seriously and didn't only talk to my dad. And so then like, I started shopping with her, and we actually went to buy 2 more triplexes, like literally within a 1 block radius.
Wow.
And I then scaled the house hacking business to that level, and then we ran out of borrowing capacity because with residential mortgages, you can only, go so far. So like me and dad had stretched our, our personal debt ratios too far. And so then I got limited in terms of being able to purchase. So I thought, I want to still keep growing. What am I going to be able to do to grow my business without necessarily acquiring more real estate? And then I became a property manager. And because my business model was so good in a bad area to maximize the rents, I like sold that model to other owners in the area and was like, let me house hack your plex and I'm going to double your rent. And so then I grew that to like, I was running like 50 rooms at one point, which was crazy. And then I got a bit older and I got sick of, managing fights between college kids. I was like,
That's not
okay,
you asked for.
I'm gonna, yeah. I needed to like professionalize a little bit more. So then what I did is I got involved with this real estate coaching group, which I actually teach property management for now. And then I learned how to scale. So then I learned about joint ventures. I learned about multi-residential financing, and I started liquidating those initial triplexes and then buying larger buildings. And then that's kind of when, my investing business took off, and I decided, okay, I'm gonna stop doing so much management and I'm gonna start investing, because when I realized how much money I was making for my clients, I'm like, I kind of need to be doing that myself and not charging $300 a month in management fees. If I did this, I'm going to be the one making the 300K in building optimization money that I'm doing for my clients. So that's then kind of what happened. Like I involved myself. So my podcast is the Real Estate Investors Club podcast, and like they're a coaching organization that I'm now a partner of in Montreal. So
Awesome. Yes. So, you mentioned the podcast, so I want to stop there for a second. So everyone will stop, go listen to that, go like it, subscribe to it, just like you should this podcast. And if you want to watch us, we are on YouTube. You can go to the Deal Finders YouTube page to find us there. So definitely do that for your podcast. But I want to back up there. You were renting rooms or renting properties by the room in a college town. We are in a college town. I know what happens with when you rent by the room. Is that still the main model you do, or that was to get the cash flowing early on?
yeah, that's it. That's exactly what that was. And then, our market shifted, and this whole transition, like I kind of compressed the timeline a little bit, but this whole, our market started blowing up about 10 years ago. Us in Canada, we really didn't have 2008. So there was no market correction here. And then we're 2023 now. So around like 2012, 2013, the market really started shifting, and that part of town really gentrified. So my property values went up like crazy. But the other thing that happened is that the rents adjusted so that I actually wasn't making more money by renting by the room than I would have made with conventional rentals.
Yeah.
And so basically I just like let those rooms turn over and then flipped all of my rentals to like unfurnished conventional rentals to groups of tenants where I didn't have to be, running the party on Saturday night and getting calls from the cops because they're making too much noise.
I hear that. So that's a really, really important lesson. And I want to just kind of unpack that for people that are listening. And we like to try to give some sort of actionable steps, something that you can really think about and put into your business on this podcast. And this is something that's so important because it's happening again now with evaluating, like you said, you're renting by the room. And for example, maybe you're getting $2,000 a month. And then, but the regular rent rates started creeping up where maybe they used to be 1,000. Now they're like 1,900, right? And so the benefit of dealing with four, individual leases, individual tenants, individual rooms, was the extra cash flow. Well, now if it's $100, $200 a month, there's no benefit, right? Because it's a lot of work. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was like a total like who moved my cheese situation. And I think like if you only have like a small slice of the market, right? Like here we had in COVID, I'm sure like you guys had the same experience. Like you couldn't make a mistake. Money was so cheap. Initially prices weren't super expensive, and so like just people went nuts. And now that they started raising the interest rates, like I said, we didn't have the 2008 correction. So like the Canadian market's going through like a very big correction right now. And it's like just totally like a who moved my cheese kind of a moment where like before you couldn't make a mistake and you couldn't find deals. Now there's deals all over the place, but nobody has cash. So you kind of have to, like you get into the market, there's a certain set of conditions, and you develop a business model or a way of working in specific conditions. And then when the wind begins to change, well, you have to change what you're doing as well, because whatever you were doing is not going to be the appropriate strategy, either for renting or for finding deals or for financing. So it's just a, testament to adaptability, that if you want to be in the market, like for, let's say, 20 years, the way I have been, like, there's going to go through cycles, and you're going to have to adapt whatever you're doing and build a model that's like resistant to some of those shocks, right? And like that's what I'm seeing around me now, is like a lot of the investors who are newer are having real trouble, and they're like, my cash flow is negative and I don't know what to do. My loan to the private lender, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, you built a house of cards when you couldn't make a mistake. And like now that the market's down, you have to realize, how do you build something that's recession proof? So
Right. Right. And you have to continue to evaluate what that market is. Like the cheese is moving, like you said, uh, it reminds me of the short-term rental, the Airbnb of it all, where just recently, especially right after COVID, was Airbnb would triple your monthly income if you went from a regular rental to short-term rental. And you had some more expenses or whatever, but your net would still be probably double, right? Your triple your gross and then double your net. Well, now the short-term rental, the supply has grown and the demand is going down. So going from a regular rental to a short-term rental is not going to necessarily triple that income. And so now your gross, instead of being your net, instead of being double, is more like one and a quarter, or maybe even it's just the same as being a regular rental. So there's a lot of people that bought with the numbers thinking that the short-term rental was going to afford their payments. Same situation. So you got to keep evaluating the market, see where it's going, and make sure, like you said, you don't buy in a house of cards, but that you can weather some changes and be ready to change. So I love that you did that and were able to see that, and that's the reason you changed. Not that you just got bored with renting by the rooms, but it was a financial decision too, because I we have rentals that are by the room. I don't manage them. I don't think I would ever want to manage those. But they're in a location and a spot, and we have a great manager for them, and that makes sense. So kudos to you for evaluating that and seeing that change. So now what's today's business look like? You're a property management company. How many units? What's that look like?
yeah, so my property management company, we manage about 150 units, which are all in Montreal. And then as an investor, I own or own shares in about 70 units, of which half are in Montreal, half are in another submarket called Trois-Rivières, which is an hour and a half away, kind of small working class town. And my business model is like kind of like just conservative buy and hold. Like I look for low income areas where the building's already cash flow, like basically like the first triplex I bought, places that are up and coming. But a lot of other people don't dare to go there because it's still a little bit too much down.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
plenty of those.
yeah. And then I also look for like badly managed buildings, because my secret sauce is property management. So then I look for places where like the tenants aren't paying, or there's been like deferred maintenance and various things that have been neglected. And then I just, buy the building at a discount because of that. And with management, you turn it around in usually around a 2-year period.
Yeah, I love it. So, incredible business, incredible year. The quote that I always say is, it can't lose money in real estate if you stay in it. If you can stick in, if you can stay long, you're going to eventually figure out how to win. And if you hold the properties, eventually they'll come back around. So staying in 20 years, making it 40 years, you're going to be successful in it. Right. So,
and if I can just, kind of add something to that, is like time erases your mistakes. Like I bought a semi-commercial building about, 6-7 years ago, that like, it just did not do what it was supposed to do for the first 2-3 years. Like we were running a deficit, and the rentals weren't what we thought they were going to be. It was supposed to be an office center, and the building was actually in worse shape than we thought. And so like for the first 2-3 years, like I bought it with a partner, and we were pulling our hair out. Like, this is just not going how we want. And then my partner wanted out. So then that created a problem, because I had to then find the cash to buy them out. But I was like, I'm not selling.
Yeah.
It's not time to sell this because I don't want to sell at the same price we bought at after all the effort we put in. So I ended up buying out my partner. And then when I sold it, whatever, I think 5 years, it was a 5-year plan, and I sold it at the 5-year mark. The value of the building had doubled.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, yeah. But if I had thrown in the towel in the first 2 years when the going was tough, like I would have just pulled my money out and not lost money. But all of that, all of that cheese was like deferred gratification cheese. So the market will erase mistakes that you make.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, we make a lot of mistakes. I know when I started, I made plenty of them. And so now we do these podcasts, right? And you have yours, we do ours, and you coach people, we coach people and teach how to eliminate those mistakes or make the small mistakes, right? And hedge your risk and your bets, so you can make successful businesses, and trying to make the mistakes and trip ups along the way a little smaller. So we got a few more minutes left. I wanted you just wrote a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the book is called The Mindful Landlord. One of the things we didn't touch on in the interview is, so I actually had a career as like a martial artist before. And the sort of mindset that I ended up applying to my real estate business came from that sphere. And like when I say mindset, it's not really like the right word in terms of positive affirmations. It's more understanding how your mind functions so that you can help yourself perform better. And
Right.
if I can just like give you a really quick explanation of this. So like we have 3 different levels of consciousness. There's your thoughts, your emotions, and your presence.
Uh-huh.
And at certain times, it's going to make sense to be with a different level of thinking. So for example, if you're like panicking about something, probably like your thoughts are going to be running 1,000 miles an hour. But like sometimes that's not the most productive place to be, to have good decisions or to behave appropriately for whatever the situation is. And like, in real estate, like if it's that you're going into, a stressful negotiation, if you're managing tenants who are in your face, or like there's times when like we can get really stressed or really worried about stuff. And so, learning how to identify more with presence or like how to manage your emotions can be so key in becoming a successful, mindful landlord. And so that's what the book is really about. Like half of it is really how-to chapters of like what do you need to do to set up like a small real estate business. And then the other half is that all of us investors face the same mental problems. Like at the beginning, it's fear. We can't get out of our own way. We don't know what we're doing. And so the approach behavior of how you manage that fear is what makes the difference between those who get started and those who don't. So there's like a bunch of chapters about like managing fear, how to get over the unknown, how to like, mentally get the right cues, because fear is there to protect you. But if you
Right.
let it gain the upper hand, it will stop you.
Oh yeah, I love that right there. So the book obviously goes way more in depth into that and gets people going, right? To get over that fear is, I feel like we talk about it so often because it's such a limiting factor for people that are trying to get started in a new business. Um, real estate, especially because that's where we are, and it's just not taught throughout school. So when you come up and you're like, oh, real estate, it's so new. It's not taught at, Christmas or Thanksgiving tables, or, like it's not in family meetings where we're like, oh yeah, how about that real estate deal? Like it's just new. And so there's so much fear that people just stop.
Yeah.
And I guess you've seen that here as well, right?
Yeah, but I mean, so look, the actual real estate knowledge is not taught, but like dealing with fear is also not taught. And like,
True.
as someone who's part of like a real estate coaching, company, like one of my big complaints with the industry is that like, look, the knowledge is out there. It's just like dieting. Like the knowledge to lose weight is out there. But the difference between people who actually do it and those who don't, it's up here. And so like, you can speak to the game plan, which is like tactics, but like if your mind is not aligned with what you're trying to do, it's never going to happen. You could be the expert, a nutrition expert, but still be way overweight. Just like there's people like who come to, let's say, our monthly meetups, like who are the expert on every little data piece of real estate, but like they don't own anything. It's like, okay, well, you have so much knowledge, but you have not put that into action because your mind is not tuned to get over some of those fears or those behaviors that are self-defeating. And so for me, like, those two things really need to be taught together, because if you can't get out of your own way, all the knowledge in the world is not going to help you.
Oh, 100% right there. Y'all, just for that, you need to buy the book. It's gonna be gold. I mean, what you just gave was gold, because it's so true. And I don't think I've put the two together, that getting over fear is not taught. It's not shown. That's why we spend so much time talking about it and helping people get over that fear, and doubt and those things that keep you from moving forward. So I love that you wrote a book about it, because like I said, it's not there. It's not out there. So you guys, I encourage you to get that book, and we will put a link for it. I assume we can order it on Amazon, right?
Yeah, for sure. Amazon, Mindful Landlord, or I have a website just for the book, mindfullandlord.com. So it's
Perfect. So we will put that in the link. I forgot to ask you how to order it. So but yeah, so we'll put that in the show notes so that you guys can do that. So Terrie, thank you so much for being here, guys. This has been an incredible podcast. I hope that you got something from it, and are now maybe thinking about, what is that fear stopping me from getting into real estate? If you are trying to get started and you're thinking about what's my next step, you might want to jump over to dealfindersclub.com, where you can look at our community of investors, people that are experienced or just getting started, and see if maybe joining a community that will keep you accountable and help you get over those fears by showing you it's possible. Check it out, see if that's for you. In the meantime, come back to the Deal Finders podcast next time, and we'll see you here. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the REI Deal Finders podcast. You can find out more and apply to be a part of the REI Deal Finder community at reidealfinders.club.